asynchronously.
Tommy, could you start from one, please?
Reset, or I quit out of the app and restarted it, and now the button's there. So
okay, you know what's nice? It's nice to know that not all our meetings are being recorded unless this is what they want.
Now you just unrecorded it.
Sorry for interrupting.
Don't worry about it. Please continue.
Anyways, get user details, async data fetching. So this required a few things on our end. So you'll see that previously this action is being called from the use navigation talon. It had no properties, so one of the things we have to do now is kind of tell it how it's going to fetch its data. So we're kind of calling this like query invoker, but there's the API for Apollo, kind of using hooks to execute queries, is a little inconsistent. So mutations return you a promise. Use query executes the query immediately, so not something we would need. Use lazy query. Unfortunately, does give you a query invoker, but it doesn't return you a promise. So we decided to create a simple utility that kind of just wraps query execution in a callback, and then Apollo client query returns a promise, so we can kind of have this consistent API for executing queries in Redux actions. So there's documentation here on why we created this. It does look like Apollo will probably change, use lazy query to return a promise in a future release, so this utility should not be needed anymore. But until then, this is kind of how we solve that problem.
Are they not going to expose observable query anymore?
What is that?
Oh, sorry. The idea of Apollo being that it may yield multiple times, so that's why it doesn't return a promise. It returns an object that can fire multiple events or something. But I think they were arguing about whether to make it internal if no one was using it, right? Anyway, if it's not something you read about, it's not there.
No, in the scope of this, we're really just looking to gut rest, add GraphQL, make the refactors as simple as possible, and then we kind of have this expectation that after we do all of this work and rest is gone, that we will probably want to make this a lot easier. Like, it's not great that this has to be a dependency. It would be nice if like you could pre-configure Peregrine with the queries that actions need to run, so you don't have to pass it every time you call it. But it's kind of just an intermediate step and to an ideal state. And then the usage you'll see here is in the Talon, one of the new props now is customer query. So if we look just at navigation, our get customer query is here. We pass it to the Talon, and then the Talon is what actually executes that effect to fetch that data. So it just uses that new hook with the query, passes it to the action, and that's all you have to do. So we are very much looking for feedback, I guess, in this pattern, and we've kind of already established some pitfalls that are going to happen. We have some actions that call other actions, so that means if that action needs to execute a query, that's now like a dependency tree that you need to establish. So Stephen may touch on this more in his stuff, but this is going to be like an easy way to get us off rest and hopefully to a better state using GraphQL, and then we can start doing fun stuff with observable queries, not worrying about fetching data again, as mutations should automatically update like our cache. I think once we get entirely on GraphQL, it's going to be really cool and we can start doing some fun stuff.
Yeah, and the React suspense for data fetching is really what we're waiting for, right?
Yes, yeah, that's I guess another big reason we didn't try to over-engineer a crazy solution here, because exactly that, yeah, once suspense drops in concurrent mode, data fetching is going to be a different game. So,
yeah, it's definitely going to be different than what we have now. It might not help us in certain areas though, because some of the things that some of the problems we were running into was sort of that the state dependencies between actions. And that's not going to be solved by concurrent loading of data necessarily.
Yeah, we're having like an internal debate about we know users prefer kind of fail-safe actions. So like if I go to add an item to a cart, my cart doesn't exist, create a cart. Like don't just return an error message and make them click the button again to go through some create cart then add item workflow. Like we're smart enough to assume what you're trying to do.
And that's sort of is what you were saying about having to pass, like certain actions have dependencies on others. So the add item to cart action, now in that PR you'll see that it has the add item mutation, but it also has to take the create cart mutation as well as in the function signature to the action, because for that fallback case where if you try to add the item and for some reason the current cart ID and state is invalid, we want to recreate it automatically for you. So that's sort of like, it kind of feels weird to write that code, but I think that that's just a good indicator for us for an area to improve on later. And this is sort of just an intermediate state of getting us off of REST that I see.
No rest for, yeah.
Nope.
So what people really appreciate, I think, from users is that they don't want to be asked to do something they don't care about, which you guys are right on the money there. And then also for developers, it was, in my view, right on the money to say we should have all of these different methods try to return the same object, because they're all kind of doing the same thing as far as the UI developer is concerned, is they're getting data that may not be there yet. So even though in the future, we may end up having a unified interface that does work for all these use cases, and I was like, oh, observables, because those were so good at me writing good code in 2015. Even though I see that as a potential future, right now, it was definitely the right choice to unify these APIs into promises, which basically everyone understands, which are a language feature now. So that was the right choice. And if someone in the community disagrees with me, that's okay.
Any questions, any comments from anyone live?
Again, we're looking for feedback on these. There's several in-flight PRs that are ready for review.
Cart should hopefully land in the next couple days, and then moving on to checkout, which is going to be huge.
Right now in develop, create cart is already merged. So creation of the cart on develop will be through GraphQL, but all the mutations of the items in your cart, adding an item, and that sort of thing are still done with REST. But soon when those PRs land, all of cart will be done. Yeah, and then we get to do checkout, which will be fun.
Fun times.
Yeah. All right, that's it. Who's next?
Thanks, Tommy. We've got Mr. Jinsky over here. Some docs updates.
Update. 2 new topics to show.
That's loose.
There we go. Cool. So the first topic I want to present is the content rendering topic, and this is found getting started basic concepts section. Basically, this is a very broad overview of what content rendering is, difference between server-side rendering and client-side rendering, and how it affects SEO. I also go into how we do content rendering PWA Studio and what we support. There's a little blurb about how Upward does it using the file resolver and the template resolver, and then I go over the current content rendering processes with Venya, which is basically server-side fast paint and then client-side rendering with React. Certainly not the last word on SSR. We have follow-up work to improve and add more information about server-side rendering, because that seems to be a popular topic among folks.
Imagine that.
Yeah. But yeah, check it out. This is a good introduction to content rendering if you're wondering what that is. The second topic is a tutorial, a create tag list component tutorial. It's a step-by-step on how to create a tag list component the PWA Studio way, I guess. It's a very explicit steps, very hand-holdy for absolute beginners. It goes over exactly what you need to add and to what files. It provides images and what to expect once you get these files running. And in the end, you get this thing here. Yeah. Any questions?
When should we expect to see a PR for someone going through this and making the tags look cool like that? At the end of the tutorial, I was like, oh, I actually want that feature. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Now that it's so easy to do this, it's so clear how to do this. I'm just saying now, here's the call where we like hint really strongly.
I'll take that. No, great job.
Really good, thank you.
Michael said awesome in the chat. I don't know if he was talking about me or just talking about the docs, but
It's a good thing to see
Good day.
starting out. Right?
all right. Yep, so I think that's it. We were a little late today on our side, but we'll definitely pause here for any questions, any comments from the community, any demos from the community, hot topics.
I was gonna
you
bring
gonna
up Storybook. I'm not gonna demo it, but just to say that it's working again. So it was in there, but not working, and there's some debate on whether we should even have one or not. Jimmy's working on a style guide, which overlaps a little bit. But anyway, since we had it in there, we thought it should at least work. So there was a PR that landed, I think, this morning.
Nice.
So Storybook should be.
Storybook.
There's only a handful of stories in there, but at least it's operational.
Sweet.
And if you're writing your own components, you can storybooks for them as well to kind of
Yeah, sure.
be an easy way to validate things during upgrades. Anything?
True.
Guys, you've got Jimmy on the line too, so I don't know if you have anything on your side, Jimmy.
No, not yet. Progress continues on the style guide, but there's no point in demoing it until it's got something really useful for people. Regarding that storybook PR, one of the quirks of that one is that has Venia UI importing some of the glue that we use to actually make the Venia app stand up, and so that means that Venia UI is importing from Venia concept, when really the dependency direction flows that Venia concept should depend on Venia UI. So we're doing that for the storybook, but it doesn't mean that you should import anything from Venia concept into Venia UI. So
Right.
just keep that in mind.
Great, yeah. So it looks like we have no questions, and that's about it for us. So onwards and upwards. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe.
Honk like
And honk if you like
upward, fantastic.
If you go.
All right, thanks everyone.
Yeah, see you guys.
Bye.
Bye, man. It's okay to be a little bit light, considering that there's